Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy, and I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby and Dustin Zimmerman. We are going to be recording from different places today, but we are going to be talking about the running backs, and this running back class is possibly the deepest running back class ever. I'm going to be telling you about 27 running backs today, and I left some off because I didn't have any more room, and I was not going to do it, and I didn't want to take 3 hours on this video because that's just ridiculous. But there are a ton of really good running backs, and almost 20 guys I could say were at least have a round 3 grade on them. And that's something that is really special. And we might not see that again in a long time. So this is a big day for us, of course, because we love doing this. But also, like, when your team picks a running back, you're not going to be sad no matter who it is, I promise. So let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Let me share. Sorry, that's on me. I'm ready, I promise. I'm excited. This is going to be our honorable mentions list. We're going to honorable mentions, then we're going to tier, and then we're going to do our individual players. Like I said, all of these guys could be, in your top 20, but starting it off, we got Kalel Mullings out of Michigan. He took over Donovan Edwards' job this year. Donovan Edwards, of course, was a cover boy for the NCAA football game that came out this year. And he was pretty solid. He's an ex-linebacker. Moved to running back. He had 4 games of 100-plus yards. He was, of course, splitting time with Donovan Edwards in the backfield. He's a downhill runner. He was a linebacker. Think about what a linebacker would do. He's a bruiser, downhill runner, physical, strength and power. He's going to really he breaks arm tackles really well, and he falls into the end zone. He has a lot of some issues, though. I mean, he's extremely green. Long speed and patience just aren't there. And his elusiveness, he does not give a crap about running around people. He's trying to go through you, like I said. And then the next guy, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. He is a guy that's very interesting. He was the Shrine Bowl MVP. He missed the whole year this year, but he missed the whole year except for one game. And in that game, he had 13 rushes for 106 yards and a touchdown. He also forced 7 missed tackles. So, big thing with him is just, we don't know. We just don't have enough information on him. But when he was at New Mexico the year before, he was pretty solid. So we're going to just say he's good at football. He's going to make the honorable mentions list. And, he was really solid this last year, though. The year before. And in the Shrine Bowl, he had 11 carries for 97 yards, 2 touchdowns, and he was the offensive MVP. Next guy up is Woody Marks out of USC. He's a guy that, is much older, but he also had 6 games of 100-plus yards. He's also a guy that had 261 catches, 1,546 yards, and 5 touchdowns through his 5 years between USC and South Carolina. So he's been a really good receiving back his whole career. But he has some injury concerns, and he just kind of lacks some overall play strength. Good player, could be in the top 20 for some people, just not in our top 20. And then we have an FCS player out of Delaware, Marcus Yarns. Marcus Yarns is just better than everybody he was playing against, so we really don't have a baseline, but he was really good. He has a ton of receiving upside. There's a lot of good receiving backs on this page. And so he's got some burst, he's got some long speed, he's got that receiving upside, but he just didn't have the competition that we wanted to see. And when he went to the Senior Bowl, when I was like, okay, when he gets to the Senior Bowl, that'll be his big test, and he didn't play well enough for me to be like, oh yeah, he's a top 20 guy in this class. I just thought I think he's solid, and possibly a 1B to somebody at the next level. Then we have Ja'Quinden Jackson, and he's kind of like the Kalel Mullings build. Big body, goal line type of back. Pretty good contact balance, which is one of the most important things of anything you get with a running back. But he's probably scheme fit dependent. And for as big as he is, he wasn't a very good pass blocker, so that really hurt his overall grade in this class. He only had 10 plays of 15-plus yards. That shows he's not as explosive as some of the other guys that you really want to see that. But he did have 15 touchdowns because he just fell into the end zone because they gave him the ball every time they were within the 5. Phil Mafah out of Clemson. He was a solid player. I've seen him in the top 10 of some boards, so I'm not there. I don't, but at the same time, he's solid. 6 games of 100-plus yards, downhill runner, similar to what we just said about Ja'Quinden and Kalel. Good vision, but he's not explosive. He's not twitchy. He misses out on some of that stuff. And his elusive rating is a 49.5, which is almost the worst in this class. We've said this class is so good, but that's not very good even for any class. And then Jaden Blue, last guy on this board. Jaden Blue is a late riser in this draft process. He was actually not the starter for Texas, which I thought was interesting because he's very explosive in the open field, but he's basically just a 1B style player, a receiving style back, and his opportunities come from that. He also disappointed in his 40 when he said he was possibly going to run the fastest 40 of all time. That obviously didn't happen. I believe he was a
4.38.
3.8. Okay, yeah. So that
Still
kind of
fast.
says yes, yeah,
Still fast, but it's just the expectation of it that you put it about. But also, we were kind of questioning the legitimacy of it because he didn't jump off as like he's a high 4.3s or low 4.2s kind of back. He's not like a burner or a can break it wherever. And obviously, like you said, Quintravion Wisner. In a offense that really caters to just, hey, we want a bell cow that can just take all the touches. He lost the job to him, and he won't even be the starter going into next year. So it's just kind of one of those things that's tough with Mr. Blue.
Yeah. Anybody y'all want to hit on that y'all really liked watching this year? Obviously, some of them don't play in the FBS and also have been hurt the whole time. So.
Well, Woody Marks, like you mentioned, he's a kind of a scat back, receiving back. It's tough to just immediately off the rip pull up like receiving yards leaders for running backs, but I mean he had 261 receptions over a 5-year span, including a season where he had 83. Mostly he was just like a 1B for 4 years, and then finally took the reins in his 1 year at USC, and then obviously doubled his scrimmage yard total from the year prior. Yards per touch was awesome and all that stuff. So he's just one of those that's going to be a very solid role player in the right fit.
I watched a lot of Jaquindon Jackson. He was really good last year at Arkansas, and then this year he started off really well. He did have a couple of injuries, though, which I think kind of hampered this last year for him. He lost a bit of his speed, especially, and also his power with him being that power back that you mentioned. I'm still high on him. I think he could have a good career. I actually need to see him bounce back from that and kind of get back to the form I was expecting him to still be playing out this past year pre-injuries.
Yeah, he was actually one of the first guys that I watched. And so I was like, oh, he's good. He's probably top 15 in this class. And then I just kept watching guys. He just kept falling, and he kept falling. And I'm like, I don't know what to say. Like, he's not bad.
A lot of the, what I was just saying, as is the case for a lot of these guys, they're it's the class. There's so many that are really good. Any other year, Jaquindon's much higher, but with this class, this just is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. But let's go over to the first tier set that we have here. This is going to be our 7th tier. And so there's a lot of tiers, obviously, when you rank 20 players. But 7th tier is going to be between these guys here. Some of these guys I've seen in the top 10 of boards. I was really sad to have to put Kyle Monangai this far down. I love Kyle Monangai. And I'm going to say that a lot about all these guys because I love a lot of these guys and how they play. Kyle Monangai, he's just going to try to run through your face. And he has a good elusive rating. But he had 6 games of 100-plus yards. He's a high IQ guy. He's one of the guys that, like, you're like, oh, he's a grinder. Like, I could give this guy 20 rushes and not think that he's, going to wear and tear throughout the year. He's just a ball of freaking muscle. That is just I literally put Swole AF on his thing because I'm just like, this dude is just massive. Absolutely yoked. And he had 116 0.3 yards per game, like really good in that. He's awesome in pass pro because he's so yoked, but he also has the low center of gravity being at 5'8". And he's a 3-down back. So this is, we're going to talk about different types of backs. There's, receiving backs. There's, the 3-down backs, and then you also have just power backs and stuff like that. Well, this guy actually fits the bill for 3-down backs. So he can take on 70% of the snaps, 65% of the snaps on a team. So I really like him, and it's really hard to put him this far down, but there are so many good players. I love the mental part of his game to compete, and he's going to literally do anything he can effort-wise to get in the end zone. But he does have some issues with pass production. pass catching production, and he's just not the most athletic guy. And there's just so many athletes in this class that I just feel like he had to be this far down. Jarquez Hunter is a guy that Dustin loves. We've talked about in the past. He had some of the highest elusive rating that I've seen. He had 140.5, which is just absolutely insane. He's a good pass blocker. He's a compact downhill runner. He's explosive, works hard through the first level. So after he gets past the line of scrimmage, he really pushes through that area of the field, falls forward and stuff like that. He's very scheme versatile, patient. He has some really good contact balance for his actual size, because the problem with him is he runs like he's 250, like 220, 225, but he's 204 at 5'9", and so that's a kind of an issue, because going to the next level, these guys are going to be bigger, more athletic, stronger. Jarquez, I have those kinds of reservations with, but yards after contact 4.1 is excellent. So we know that he can run through arm tackles and do those types of things. But I just wish, if he was going to be this type of player, I wish he was a little bit bigger, because he's actually the same size as RJ Harvey, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. And then you have Trevor Etienne. Trevor Etienne is out of Georgia. He's the little brother of Travis Etienne. Very young players. These next two guys that we're going to talk about, very young. That was something that I think, goes into this also, because the running back position is a 28-year-old game most of the time, right? Like after you get to 28, a lot of the times you see it down, you go down. And it is what it is. But both of these guys have 8 years or 7 years before, because those ages on the screen are their ages when the season starts. So the first year of their career, when those seasons starts, is how old they are. So they still have 7 years before they hit that 28-year-old situation. Trevor Etienne, kind of, his best attribute is probably his overall pass catching upside. He's kind of the 1B option with a workhorse type of upside, but his vision is good. He sets up blocks on the interior well, and he had a really good Senior Bowl pass blocking, so I thought that was good. But the problem is, I don't know that he has. Remember when Dameon Pierce came out of Florida, and we were like, "Oh, this guy's never had more than 11 carries a game," and then the first year he just went for 20. Felt like 15 to 20 carries a game. Well, that's the same issue I'm seeing with Trevor Etienne, who is an ex-Florida Gator. So just the load capacity, I don't know if he can do it. He had injuries, and he had 3 seasons. These last 3 seasons, he averaged 123 carries per game, and that's just not very good. So we have to see if he can take on a lot more carries. And then, last guy on the board, Jordan James. He had 6 games for 100-plus yards. He didn't really have anything that stood out to me. I think he should have gone back to school more than anything, because he is in such a loaded class. I think it would have been really good for him. But he runs behind his pads. He's a patient guy. He's got really good vision. He accelerates well. He's physical. I just think he lacks some long speed. He's like short, choppy steps, more so than like those extended steps where he gets out of the box and stuff like that, gets outside. And funny enough, I said contact balance is super important. Well, I think he lacks in that situation. Of all the guys, he's one of my least favorite, like lowest graded in contact balance. So when he gets hit from non-forward angles, so if someone is hitting him in the face, sure, he has balance. But if someone hits him from the side at all, he goes down a lot easier than I was expecting. So I thought that was bad. And then his pass blocking, he's not necessarily a very good pass blocker. Okay.
Yeah, and with Jordan, like you mentioned, a lot of people have him kind of much higher. Trevor Etienne, kind of a similar boat. Very interesting, like you said, both of them very, very young. And again, these ages are at the start of the season, not what they currently are. So very, very young, both of them under 21 years old. With Trevor, it's an interesting dynamic because obviously, like you mentioned, the brother of Travis, it's kind of similar to like a Dalvin versus James Cook, and just having no idea how to project it, because we saw Dalvin be one of the best running backs in the country, second round pick, running back 1 in his class, and then James Cook just never had like that type of workload or role. And we didn't know coming out of Georgia, like, hey, is this just like they just don't give people 20 touches a game, or can he actually handle it? And lo and behold, he led the league in touchdowns this year. And then with Travis, like having a long-standing career as like a touchdown maker, just giving the ball 30 times a game kind of thing on a good Clemson team, and then all of a sudden kind of just not really achieving much as a former first round pick. So with Trevor, I know he has no workload, but maybe that could be to his benefit because we're seeing more and more guys that just you don't need the big 2,000-yard seasons to come right away and just contribute.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned that I love Jarquez Hunter because it's very true. So thank you for that. It's so interesting with him because he ended up being second in the SEC behind Dylan Sampson. And for the first half of the year, Hugh Freeze's offense, the Auburn head coach, was don't give him the ball. And then it's like a switch flipped, and they were like, hey, maybe we give it to the guy who's really good at running and really strong and can do that. And then he goes and gets second and then has, like you mentioned, the 140.5 elusive rating. So it would have been interesting to see where he'd be had they done that the whole season and what his full stats would have been had they game planned correctly, because their record also shockingly improved when they gave the guy who's really good at running the ball to run. But I also agree with where he's at here as we move forward at the rest of the board.
Tom Monangai and Jarquez Hunter were both guys that were just situations where I watched them early and they started to fall. Like I told you, I was like, dang, Jarquez Hunter's great. I think he might end up being, in the 12 range. And then all of a sudden it was like, ooh, I don't know. There's so many good football players. There's a couple guys, and we'll talk about, but there's guys it's like, I like them more than maybe consensus, and maybe some guys less than consensus, like with Jordan James and Trevor Etienne, because I don't see the same explosiveness that I see with some of these other guys. And explosiveness is not learned as much as it is just like natural a lot of the times, right? So, going from year to year, like of course guys get better just because they're smarter and they learn how to like run the ball correctly and stuff like that. But like I don't know that I think Jordan James will ever become as explosive as some of the guys that we're going to talk about in a little while.
No. Do you know at the top of your head what the max like elusive rating is for a running back?
I think it's probably in the 230 or something like that.
Okay.
Because
I was going to say, because I'm looking at our spreadsheet and how high it is. Obviously, we're talking a ton of running backs. He has the third highest elusive rating. GT's all the way up at 215.
Yeah.
But,
Freak.
very, very strong elusive rating for a guy that, just kind of really flying under the radar right now.
Yeah, he's a guy that I think, if he would have his testing too, testing is a big thing. So some of these guys on this list, like maybe didn't test as well as some of the other guys and stuff like that. Because there's, you have to like really pick apart all these guys. They're really close together on these lists. So trying to figure out, how to rank them, every little thing goes into it basically.
Gotcha.
Let's go to the next.
To answer Cam's question real quick, the elusive rating is actually an infinite. It's a formula. It's missed tackles force divided by designed run attempts plus receptions multiplied by yards after contact per attempt multiplied by 100. So all that to be said, there is no theoretical max.
Okay. Well, I bet you GT's up there with the best of all time with that 215.
That's crazy. That's got to be the best of all time, except for maybe guys that play like three kick like touches and they got like a touchdown on it.
Right.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next one though. Tier 6, maybe. Oh no, I gotta go over here. Sorry. Tier 6. RJ Harvey is going to highlight this. RJ Harvey's 122.3 elusive rating is just... Okay, first off, PFF is wrong. Because his elusive rating is 180 to me. Like, he is that guy. He makes people miss. We talk about phone booth guys that can make people miss in a phone booth. This is the guy. He's got some of the most you go watch RJ Harvey. Like, if you're watching this video, go watch RJ Harvey after this because you're going to be like, holy hell, this dude is so cool to watch play football. And he was an AP, he was a third-team All-American. AP put him third-team All-American. He had 131.4 yards per game. Biggest issue, he's 24.5. Like, let's just be honest. Like, that's tough. That's the elephant, right?
Right.
But he had 32 15-plus yard runs. Explosive. 9 games of at least 100-plus. And his elusiveness is crazy. Like, he's just crazy. So that's his calling card, truly. He's good in the pass game, fine in the pass game, but he can't pass block, so that kind of takes away. He's a smaller guy, 5'8", 205, but he is an absolute stud. 6.8 yards per carry is awesome. He does so many good things, so many good things. And I asked you, I was like, how far can age drop him? Like, because truly, I've seen him top 7 on some boards, and it's like I don't think he's that good. I don't think he's as good as some of the top 7 guys. But
Sure.
like I'm like, how far does age drop you when you're already after your first contract going to be 28 years old? So that's a question we'll talk about in a second. Bashal Tutin ran the fastest 40 at the combine. He's also extremely elusive, 143.2 elusive rating. RJ Harvey's more elusive than Bashal Tutin. I'm just going to be honest about it though. But he had 6 out of 11 games for 100 plus yards. He's probably a 1B, but his outside zone scheme, he can pass block. He has the low center of gravity, and he glides when running. Like, he's an absolute glider. He's just so, fast, long speed fast. I think he's not as quick. Not as quick, though. When he hits the hole, I think he rounds it a lot instead of, putting his foot in the ground and just taking off. And so that was something that I thought was interesting because of how athletic he was at the combine and what he was able to do. I thought he would be more of a guy that would just, put his foot in the ground and explode out. He has some cons, He doesn't pass catch the ball. He's not a big pass catcher. His running style, it kind of lacks urgency to me. Like, maybe he's just gliding. Maybe he's that good at gliding, but he kind of doesn't. It doesn't look like he just wants to attack. But he has so much upside as a player that he's this high at 14. And then Taj Brooks, all right. I texted Cam. And I was like, look, I love Taj Brooks. I love RJ Harvey. I love Taj Brooks. I like Taj Brooks because he is Le'Veon Bell. And that is such a crazy comparison because Le'Veon was one of my favorite running backs that I've ever watched. I loved watching his patience and being behind the line of scrimmage and then all of a sudden finding the hole and exploding through it. Taj Brooks is just like that. If Le'Veon was obviously in this class, Le'Veon would be higher than Taj because Le'Veon was a better athlete. And he wasn't 5'9", he was 6'1", and he just had a little bit more juice. But I really, really like Taj Brooks, and I really like what he brings. He's also a workhorse type of back. He basically has had... So I want to read the stats off. In 2024, Taj Brooks had 286 attempts for 5.3 yards per carry. 1,505 yards, 17 touchdowns. Le'Veon Bell had 382 attempts, 4.7 yards per carry, 1,793 yards, and 12 touchdowns. So he was actually more productive. Taj Brooks had 11 out of 11 games for 100-plus yards. Every single game he had 100-plus yards. So I love this guy. He's out of Texas, out of Austin. He just gets me excited. He had 576 attempts in 2 seasons, just absolute workhorse. Averaged 24 attempts per game. He excites me, but he doesn't have the long speed. He's only at 15. I'm this excited about him. Doesn't have the long speed, doesn't have the athleticism, and he's got some miles on his legs that I'm like, okay, maybe those are issues. But I really like him, man. I really, really like him. And then the last guy on the board is LaQuinn Allen Jr. He had an awesome Senior Bowl, really made himself some money, and made me go back and watch him. His age is awesome, as you can see, 21 years old. He has the possible top receiving ability in this class, plus level third down back, basically. High vision, finishes runs with really good balance. He's scheme versatile, and like I said, he's the top guy at all receiving metrics. Problems are, lacks a little bit of change of direction because he's long-legged and he takes, he's strider, big strider. Doesn't, can't just stick it and go. That also hurts his acceleration a little bit. And I think he's got good athleticism, but I think that there's obviously better in this class overall. So that was something. And then if you just look at stats-wise, 3.0 yards after contact, not very good. 56.4 elusiveness rating. I didn't think that was good, obviously. And then only 11 15-plus yard runs. But he did have a lot less attempts than some of the other guys because he played at Syracuse, where Syracuse is this team that threw the ball the whole game. I mean,
Yeah.
Kyle McCord had more passing attempts than anybody in the nation. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a fun just we're just getting started, and it's exciting with all these names. RJ was one of those that's just interesting. He dealt with what was it, injuries,
Yeah.
for why he's stayed as long as he did. If he was 3 years younger, he would no question be among the top 10 in my eyes, at least,
Top
because
8.
of how easily. But yeah, very fun back. Tuden, like you said, is just the pure burner and very very fast, athletic. Taj Brooks is the workhorse of this group, at least. I really like the Le'Veon Bell comparison, just because yeah, like I said, or I at least watched a ton of him, at least when Texas was in the Big 12, and it just always seemed like, man, he is just constantly moving the chains just every single time. It's really fun just seeing backs that are like that. And then LaQuint Allen, like you said, is the pure just third down workhorse, if you want to call it that, or 2 minute guy, because not only did he lead, among all these running backs that we're going to talk about in receptions, he also had the highest pass block grade as well, which you don't really see that every day. So that was something that stuck out to me about him.
Yeah, my two favorites, just in my personal watching on this list, were RJ Harvey and Taj Brooks. RJ, I would have loved to have seen him not in a Gus Malzahn offense this last year,
Fair.
especially when the first half of the year was basically either him or KJ Jefferson's going to run it. We're only going to scheme to that because that's all they did for the first 4 or 5 games until they benched KJ. But he's super fun, and then with the age, a little bit of concern there, but I think he's good enough to where he's worth that 13 spot. Taj Brooks is one thing I noticed on the combine was he ran a 4.52, but his game speed feels much faster than that. And then, like Cam said, he's constantly moving the chains, getting action out there. So I wasn't too worried about that 40-yard not being as impressive as I kind of expected for him, just because his game speed definitely elevates.
Right. No, I completely agree. I think that Taj Brooks is going to be one of the guys that I wish I had higher, but I don't know how to put him higher, kind of thing,
No, for
it's like
sure.
one of those things.
I think it's definitely a fair position, but I could see his ceiling going up from here.
Yeah, so if I had to pick, that's my guy based on where he goes, because I don't know where they're going to go in the draft. He might be the 25th running back off the board. He might be the 12th running back off the board. Well, if he goes 25th, that's awesome. All day long. So, kind of thing. But yeah, let's go to the next grouping. This is okay. So 13, where 13 hit 12 to 13, and that break, that's where I got kind of it was harder to place these guys. 13 through 20 was a lot harder to place. I did not have any problems from 12 to 1. Honestly, after the first few watches, after the first watch, and then going back and thinking about these guys and stuff like that, 12 to 1 was pretty easy to rank. So we'll get into it right now. 12 is gonna. Sorry, let's start with 9. I apologize. We've been doing that way. So Damian Martinez out of Miami, who is possibly one of the best pure runners in the class. He did not have a ton of action. First off, he didn't get a ton of rushing attempts and overall, which was interesting. But he did have 4.46 yards after contact, which is great. He had 126.1 elusive score, which is one of the top 5, I believe, out of all the guys. But really, when you talk about pure runners, what are they good at? Well, they're good at contact balance. They're good at footwork. And they're natural just at finishing runs, right? They fall forward. They don't give up. You get an extra yard every time they run the ball. And he's good at all those things. That is the main things in my thoughts is that's what he's good at, and that's what I think good running backs are good at. He's super gifted with the ball in his hands naturally, and his legs just never stop. He has some bursts, he has some agility, and he's 217. So when you get to the goal line, you can still leave him in the game, and he can still get in the end zone, which is really good to see. Problem is, he might be one of the worst pass blockers in the class. And so on third down, he probably has to come off the field. And if he had pass blocking, he would be in the next tier for sure. Because that's such a big thing at this time of the NFL, basically.
Sure.
So he's not a 3-down back. But he's, he lacks some long speed. But he actually was fine in the receiving game. I think that Cam Ward really looked for him late in his progression. So I think that was fine. It's just He's one of the best runners in the class, but he also lacks that pass blocking and not truly a 3-down back, and that's why he's at 9. Devin Neal, who is higher on a lot of boards, and I know that, but we saw the issues with Devin Neal at the combine. He is not an explosive athlete that might be considered to be in the top 8, because the top 8 all have explosive freaks that were really impressive throughout the year and at the combine. So pros, he's super tough, super powerful guy. He's a good receiver. He's a true 3-down back. He can do it all, and so that's always fun. He's got some like awkward elusiveness, and we've actually talked about this before, me and Dustin. But like when he makes you miss, it's not like a big time move. It's just kind of like quick. Oh, I'm gone, and it's not like a big like. He's not gonna make distance with like the yards. He's gonna try to run through your arms. Yeah. So that's kind of like his like style, which he of course he's a one cut style. He's a power back. He's probably a 1A. And one thing that I will say though, he's not good in pass pro, so that was tough. But he's not terrible in pass pro. He regressed a little from last year to this year, so that was something that I thought was interesting, which I don't like to see. And so his athleticism plus the bad year kind of was like, okay, let's take a thought and like not put him as high, because I didn't think he was nearly as good. So that's why he's at 10. Ollie Gordon, the second, is at 11. And he's actually the same situation where he regressed. He was the number 1 guy in the class, possibly. Him and Quinshawn were fighting over that spot to be number 1 in this class. Between 2023, he had 324 plays, 2,062 total yards, and 22 touchdowns. This year, he had 219 plays, 1,059 total yards, and 14 touchdowns. He only had 8 15-plus runs, which is terrible, and he had a 4.6 yards per attempt. Most people will be like, why is he up here? And it's because of the fact that he has such upside. Insane upside. He's a physical freak. If he plays like he did against BYU this year, in next year, he will be a perfectly fine player. If he plays like he did in 2023, he will be perfectly fine. So he's actually really impressive as an athlete. He hurdles people for his size. It's pretty crazy. He's got super good receiver traits. And he's a good pass blocker, good vision. He's a true 3-down back. He probably lacks some long speed, some explosiveness, but he's a long strider. So that kind of makes sense. And maybe some creativity. You know what I mean? Like he kind of runs into people. So that makes sense too. And then the last guy on the list is Brashard Smith. He played wide receiver at Miami before he went to SMU, first year playing running back. And he was green to start the year, but he had 7 games with 100-plus yards. He's explosive. He's got that quick twitch style to him. And, of course, naturally, he's got receiving ability. He's a good blocker, actually, which is pretty good to see. And the problem with his pass protection is strength, and it's just he just doesn't have the technique yet because he hasn't done it long enough. But experience is going to come, and I'm really excited about him. He's actually one of the guys that I will call my guys because I think he's lower on most lists, but if he does hit that ceiling that I think he has, he's going to be one of the best running backs in the class. So, yeah.
Yeah, this is starting to kind of be the list of just kind of merging between like high draft capital investment and like late risers or guys that we think are just too low on boards. Obviously with Ollie Gordon, just starting with him, let's not have too short of a memory on him because he obviously was the Doak Walker winner in 2023 and just an incredible 2,000 yards from scrimmage season. He had to come back because he was a true sophomore. And then obviously Oklahoma State just sucked this year, and a lot of it negatively impacted him. I mean, they lost 9 straight to end the season, 7 of them by 2 scores, and culminating in a 52-0 loss to Colorado, where it's like, okay, him going 4 for 10 yards, it's not really his fault that they're down 52 points. He's not a guy that you're saying, okay, we're playing catch up, we need to have you make plays. He's a guy you're going to play from a lead with, give a bulk of carries to, and he's going to kind of grind into the later months of the season and help benefit your team. So him running the second slowest 40, or probably slowest of any of the draftable running backs, isn't really a concern, because like you said when we were talking about, or when we were hanging out watching the combine, you're like, well, would you expect him to run? Like, it's not like his game is meant on speed. So him being this high, if he was eligible to come out last year, would have been the number one running back in the class in my eyes, and I would gamble that both of y'all would agree with that. So there's that with him. And then Brashard Smith, something cool, because he was a SMU guy that obviously they went on their playoff run, and he was a huge part of it. He was the only running back in the country this year per PFF to grade both as a 85.0 or higher in both a rushing grade and a pass receiving grade. So basically a two kind of do it all type of back. Even though he doesn't have a ton of size, he has the ability to do both, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, coming into this year, Devin Neal, and I had told you this, I had real high expectations for him and Jalen Daniels to have this amazing, basically how I just referenced UCF, what they were wanting to do, of a really good running quarterback and a really good running back, and have this crazy good offense. And then I have a hard time with regression as far as when I'm thinking about and grading guys, because I want to see constant progression throughout every year and show that they've developed or learned something. To Cam's point with Ollie Gordon, his team was really bad, so I don't blame Ollie Gordon near as much on that one. But Devin Neal with Kansas, it felt like he just, I don't want to say he lost a step or anything, but he just wasn't as impressive as I expected him to be. And then Brashard Smith, I loved watching. I loved what SMU did this year with going to the ACC and being a powerhouse there, and all they were able to pull off. And then Brashard Smith's just a lot of fun to watch. I'm actually excited to see how he develops, and see, especially because he's still fresh at the running back, just how they utilize him at the next level and what he's going to be able to do. Especially because I feel like he has a ton of room for development since he's still learning it.
Yeah, I think Brashard Smith is my most projected ranking out of everybody, because being 12 is it's a good class. So I'm projecting him to have a very good career, even knowing maybe he has so much inexperience right now that it's kind of far off to see. But I think the running back position is a position that you can kind of come into and have a 1B, 1A, situation and be okay, even if you're inexperienced. So I'm really excited about him. Do y'all want to talk about anything else on these guys before we go on to our individual pages?
No. Basically, point. Other than the fact that Damian Martinez and Devin Neal are going to be day 2 picks, Ollie Gordon and Brashard Smith likelihood going to be day 3, and just all of them have the opportunity, just depending on where they go, and that just speaks to this class.
Yeah. Let's go over to the next one. This is going to be the start of our 4th tier. And another guy that I just absolutely love. This is DJ Giddens. And DJ Giddens was a guy that I didn't know a lot about, actually, coming into the year. I didn't know a lot about, talking about just while we were watching throughout the year, because Kansas State didn't have necessarily the same years they had with Will Howard in previous years, But this guy is freaking crazy. And actually, I'll send something to y'all later, but if anybody that's watching, I want y'all to go watch the highlights of DJ Giddens against Colorado, because I've never seen someone lose their ankles or their kneecaps the way that DJ Giddens made Shiloh Sanders lose his 3 times in the same game. 3 times. Yep. Just absolutely, that elusive rating is insane for a guy that's 6 foot 212 to me. He's a young guy. Of course, the touchdowns were low. I wish that was higher. But he had 25, 15-plus runs. He's got this great elusiveness. He's a great pass blocker. Vision, burst, change of directions. And he might be the most smooth runner in the class. You watch him and you're like, wow. He looks like he's a track runner. You know what I mean? And he really fits that. Just a great natural runner. And his cuts... he sells out on his change of direction. He puts his whole body down to make you on his jukes to make you think he's going one direction. And I just think this guy's awesome. He almost runs too fast. That's almost a con, because sometimes he's like shot out of a cannon out of the backfield, and then all of a sudden he gets way too close to the line of scrimmage before he can decide what he wants to do. So he can be indecisive because of it. And so I really like this guy. But one thing that I saw that was bad was he had some really bad drops. So I'd like to see him clean that up. We've seen guys in the past have bad drops and then not have bad drops when they actually played in the NFL. So we're hoping that happens. I'm hoping it's not, because he is a 3-down back because of how good his pass blocking is. And the fact that he's 6 foot 212, he can play on the goal line and do everything from, the 1 yard line to the 1 yard line. Everything on the field he can do. So he is one of the purest runners in the class, and it's just he's so much fun to watch. I really want y'all to go watch the Colorado game.
Yeah, I'm not sure, like you mentioned with the touchdowns, wishing it was higher. I'm not sure if he's just like hey, they used him between the 20s and then kind of took him out like we, frustratingly see in some, fantasy situations on running backs in the NFL. But, I was actually surprised on PFF to see how low his, overall ranking. He was 173rd among all running backs, and he was dead last in the entire country last year in receiving grade. So kind of those things kind of stand out to me. But, I mean, like you said, it's more of an on-tape thing that just makes you like him more and more. So just kind of big games and showing up in big spots is what really kind of, makes me think about DJ Giddens.
Yeah, but like I said, they're atrocious, the drops. So that, and I know that goes into receiving grade, not just like route running and stuff. Right. I'm sure that brought him down because he had some drops. I was like, hey, like there's no one for 20 yards. Like you're still running today, kind of thing. So that was pretty annoying by him, if anything.
Yeah, I mean, with him, with the drops, I feel like that's something that ideally, at least, he can get fixed and patched up. And I'm sure every scout that's watched him has gotten in his ear and said, hey, you're great, but you got to figure this out, dude.
Yeah.
The one thing with the touchdowns, I was looking into it, with Avery Johnson being the quarterback there, he's a dual threat guy. He had 7 rushing touchdowns, and the offense is really built around him thriving. So DJ's lack of touchdowns, to me, isn't that surprising because of that. They like Avery Johnson to throw it or scramble on his own. And B, I think if he just wasn't in that system, it probably would have been higher too.
Fair. Any other questions about this guy? Because we're about to
say let's jump on to 7.
7, Cam Skattebo. And some people have Cam Skattebo in the top 3. So, I'm not there. I think Cam Skattebo is one of the elite, like elite guys that like just hard-working effort type of player. His contact balance is really, really good. But it's more so just his will to make plays that really excites me. And he didn't run the 40, so as you can see, I put his vertical up there. His vertical was awesome. That was super impressive, and that was something that I think, should be talked about because the biggest problem was, is he an athlete? How good is his athleticism, And so him being able to jump a 39.5, and I want to make sure that that's correct, but, he just has some athleticism that I didn't expect, maybe. Toughness, competitor, strength and power, capable of just... When we watched that UT game, the UT game, like, he was the MVP of that game. He was the only reason that the Arizona State was in that game.
Yep.
And he had the passing touchdown. He had the rushing touchdowns. I believe he had a receiving touchdown. He had 99 receiving yards, an insane, like, all-purpose yards. The dude had more than half the team, possibly 3/4 of it. So that was really good to see. But I do think he still lacks the athleticism, lacks the burst. Elusiveness in open field isn't really there. He's not a fast guy. I don't know how he has a 139.1 elusive score. It's got to be that missed tackles because he forces so many missed tackles. But I think also one thing he does have some lower body tightness that you're not going to really hear about for the rest of the guys in the top 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's one of the most exciting things. I don't know if there was another player that just kind of stood out more in the first 12 team playoff than his run in the 2 game sample that we had from him. But yeah, he was doing that all year, and he was the first Arizona player that's not a kicker to be a first team All American since Jalen Strong way back in 2014. Arizona State doesn't pump out first team All Americans, so that just kind of shows how he was able to make the most out of a situation that he was in, and the will and drive is the name of the game with him. It's just not being denied on certain things is just really fun to watch as a fan of football. So yeah, those kinds of things is just really cool to see. But I was actually surprised by how like small he is, just because it feels like he plays like I even said today to our friend Nick of the show, like him being like hopefully he has more longevity as like a Peyton Hillis, but Peyton Hillis was 6'1", 250.
Yeah.
Like that's not even close to what Cam Scatterbo is. Maybe he is not as athletic as what his body type you would think would be, but yeah, he's like his own unique kind of unicorn of a running back. So definitely fun to watch.
Yeah, his height and weight remind me of Doug Martin, and I looked it up, and he was listed at 5'9", 223, so super similar to his build. Thank you, Cam, for shouting out a kicker. That warmed my heart. It needed to be said. I was looking at when he was back at Sacramento State, and he had 1,300 yards in his sophomore year there. Obviously not the same level, but then he goes to Arizona State, puts up, 783 his first year there, and then the 1711 this year. So a guy who had the talent at the FCS level comes up to FBS and then develops quickly with it. Like you said, the tightness, a little bit of a concern, but I mean, he's kind of how I call Riley Leonard a gamer. This guy's a gamer. He's going to go out and do everything he needs to help his team win.
Yeah, well, I will say he was the Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year when he was at San Jose State. So
Sacramento State, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Sorry, but yeah, so he was the Big Sky Offensive Player of the Year. But the reason he was there was because he didn't have the same ability that other players have, and it still follows him till this day. Unfortunately,
Sure.
Going to 6, a guy that is very exciting to me, Dylan Sampson, Offensive Player of the Year for the SEC, first team All SEC running back and all-purpose player. He was a third-team All-American, AP All-American, 10 games of 100-plus yards in the SEC. He had 107.5 elusive rating, which is really solid. And he was he was basically their offense because Nico, after week 5, we've talked about this before, me and Dustin in all of our videos, but he definitely took some dip. And so Dylan Sampson was the one that picked up all the slack. And This is the explosive player for the class. There's 2 guys in the top 6 that I'm going to talk about as explosiveness. 3, but we don't count Ashton Jeanty because he's just good at everything. But so there's another guy that's like Dylan Sampson that we'll talk about in a little while about the explosiveness. But there's just an extra gear with both of these guys. He's probably fit for an outside zone scheme. His insane pass game upside. And he can literally hit a home run on any play. So you have to make sure you're always... he runs so fast that he gives the cornerbacks and safeties hard times on their angles, which is something that's very impressive, especially in the SEC. So biggest cons for him are his frame. Running inside can be an issue for him because he's 5'8", 200, but he's only 20.8 years old when the season starts. He's the youngest guy in this class. I thought he was going to come back, and I'm happy that he didn't because then I got to watch him, and I was like, wow, because he's that good. But the problem is he's could be a 3-down back, but I'm not sure, and I'm also worried about just touch count overall. That's my biggest concerns with him.
Yeah, and he's honestly kind of rising as well. I'm just looking at Draft Buzz just having a bunch of guys in front of me, and they have him 5th in front of Quinshon Judkins, who was the preseason RB1 with this class. So he definitely made the most of this year. Kind of a one game or 1 year sample because he just goes as a part-time 1B in 1 year to all of a sudden just he's the guy. Tied for second most touchdowns all-purpose on this list of eligible running backs. So, he's just kind of makes plays everywhere you look. And so, yeah, he's rising accordingly.
Yeah, Emery and I have probably talked about him for an hour combined throughout our college football recaps because every single week it seems like we were talking about, did you see what Dylan Sampson did this last weekend? And how, because Nico couldn't do it. So, yeah, Dylan Sampson was awesome. I'm excited to see how he does. I wish he had run at the combine, the 40, because allegedly he ran a 4.32 in high school because he was a track star there too. So I don't know if that helps or hurts with him not running at the combine. Do you have any thoughts on either A, why he wouldn't, or B, does that affect it?
Well, so the problem is he might have been injured. Something could have happened.
Sure,
that's
right.
the reason Cam Scadaboo didn't run, which I would have loved to have seen him run also because that would have told us a lot. So he'll run at his pro day, and I always give a little bit of a buffer at the pro day because they kind of like, they give you a little love for your own team guys. But,
For sure,
give
sure.
a little buffer for the pro day. But I think that he'll be fast. He shows it on film, so I'm not worried about it, if that makes
Right,
sense.
right.
So I don't know that I needed that box to be checked because
Yeah.
that's actually what he's good at. That's
Right.
what he is elite at. So I don't know that I needed that box to be checked. I needed boxes to be checked in other things.
Sure.
But I think with him, a 4.340, I mean, it would have been really great to see somebody else, not Bashal Tutin, be talked about, kind of thing,
Sure.
to me. Because there were so many good running backs. And Bashal took the whole time of it because of his 40, even knowing
Sure.
he wasn't the best running back there. So, you ready? For
Yep,
5?
let's do it. Top 5.
Well, this guy is actually a faller. Funny enough, he's in the top 5, but he was the number 1 player coming into the year at the position. And I wondered this a little bit because when he got to Ohio State from Ole Miss has a great scheme for all their players. That's why we talk, Jackson Dart, Trey Harris, guys that are like freaks. Maybe not athletically, but they do insane numbers at that school. So we get to Ohio State, and Ohio State plays a little bit different, like style of play because they have such a good defense. They don't need the offense to be as explosive, and you also have a 1B situation where the Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are on the same team together. Well, Quinshon did take a step back. Let's just be honest about it. But at the same time, and he was the last player in yards after contact, which I don't like to see for a guy that's probably a downhill runner. Second to last in elusive rating. Second to last in pass blocking grade. Those types of things I wish were better. But we saw issues that people didn't want to talk about in his 2023 film. And those issues included him having I'm not sure what the number was exactly, but I think it was 4.8 yards per carry, which is really low. And he actually did better this year of that. So I don't know if we're just like trying to push him down this year because it's like he was on the top of the mountain and we want to bring him down a little bit, but he has a lot of good stuff. I mean, prototypical size and build, really good contact balance, powerful player, delivers the hit, good burst. Maybe not the long speed because we talked about it, me and Cam, but we watched him run that. It's in the playoffs. I don't remember who exactly it was against, but he took off and we're like, he got caught, and we were like, yeah, he doesn't look that fast. But I was like, I rewatched it and I was like, but when he exploded off of his cut, I was like, it was, impressive. So his long speed might not be there for the whole run, but it doesn't matter as much for the running back position as long as you can get that 15 plus explosive type of play. And if you get caught, it is what it is most of the time,
Sure.
right? He's scheme versatile. He's a pass catcher. He's a good pass catcher. He's a patient runner. He's a smooth runner. And he finds the gap even if it isn't where it's expected. Like, that's a big thing. You expect the gap to be one place, but he does a really good job of cutting back and finding the open hole. So I think that's good. And I just think we really overrated him a little bit, just kind of chasing his freshman numbers, expecting him to be that guy when maybe he never really was. It just perfect scheme, perfect opportunity, and then also taking advantage when he was a freshman to go for the I don't remember exactly the numbers, but he did really. His best year was his freshman year.
Yeah, I actually have it in front of me. So
do you?
yeah,
Okay.
1,560 or 1,699 all-purpose yards, 17 touchdowns as a true freshman,
Yeah.
starting every game for Ole Miss. By the way, he did not miss a game his entire college career, which is always a welcome sight for running backs. But like you said, it almost kind of feels or very inorganic in the way that he's being pushed down boards. Obviously, we never really viewed him, or we had caused a pause when people had him as a preseason potential first round pick and being the consensus RB1 without any debate for the rest. But, he has as good of a bet, if not any, to be one of the offensive rookies of the year, to me at least, because it's a down, quarterback class, down receiver class, and with all these possible running backs, like, is anybody in this episode going to be shocked if he goes for 1,400 all-purpose yards and 12 touchdowns and just kills it for a potential playoff caliber team? I don't think anybody is.
Nope, I completely agree with that. He's actually in the same tier. He's in tier 4, our 4th place guy, which after this one, and then all the way to DJ Giddens is tier 4. So all those guys are guys that are kind of going to be very similarly ranked on the top 100 big board because all of them are making the top 100 big board. That's not a question to me. So.
No. Yeah, I'm one of those guys that had Quinshawn very high as the RB1 coming into the year. That was my expectation for him. If you played the college football video game, you would have thought he was an invincible player. The guy
spin move was crazy.
Spin around 4 guys at a time and then take off and run a 4.240. Obviously, the real life isn't the video game. I kind of wish he had stayed at Ole Miss just because we did see that drop off in production, and I'm not totally sure why. Obviously, part of it with TreVeyon Henderson being there, but it just felt like he did lose a little bit, but I wouldn't say it's enough where I personally would say he regressed or anything. I completely agree. I could see him winning Offensive Rookie of the Year. I think he's still incredibly talented.
I don't know that I was surprised by the production because of TreVeyon being there. It was more so he wasn't as creative.
Yeah, I guess watching him play, it didn't seem like the same guy he was at Ole Miss, for instance.
Yeah, exactly. I wish he was more creative when he played. So that was a big thing for me. But yeah, Quinshawn's still a top 5 running back in this class to me, and he's a really good football player. So that was that shouldn't surprise anybody, I hope. But yeah. And then go to the next one. Next guy is Caleb Johnson out of Iowa. He's a guy that I've seen ranked all the way up at 2. And he's a typical, kind of powerful bruiser, but he's also extremely fast, which is something that I was kind of surprised by. On film, he's fast, especially his burst. He doesn't necessarily have the long speed, so after he gets past the first level, he's not going to run away from these safeties and corners or anything like that. But it's really he's a really explosive player out of the backfield for sure. He had 8 games with 100+ rushing yards. He had 28 15+ runs. And his 4.42 yards after contact is awesome. His yards per attempt went from 4 in 2023 to 6.4 in 2024, which is great to see. And he was a second-team All-American, absolutely deserving it, of course. He's a downhill runner, probably fits a gap scheme style. So gap scheme is pullers and stuff like that, where you're basically moving gaps to a new place. So he'll fit that style. He's good vision, patience, and he's just not going to be tackled with arm tackles, if that makes sense. He explodes through the line of scrimmage, and he's not going to be tackled with arm tackles. He's just a big back. Falls forward, that kind of stuff. But the problem is he does lack a little bit of athleticism that maybe, people are kind of talking him up to have. I think that his bend isn't as good as some people. I don't think his foot speed is that good. I think his explosiveness is good, but I don't think his foot speed is good necessarily. So he doesn't have the home run speed that you want. He's not that great of a pass blocker, but he just didn't do it. So it's not really a fair thing for him because he just didn't do pass blocking or pass game because Iowa just doesn't do that really. They have 100 yards of passing offense the whole game. So he wasn't asked to do that. And then one thing that I was it's kind of obvious at 6'1" is he runs high. So he puts his pads up and he gets hit in the middle of the chest sometimes. Well, another thing, if I asked y'all like how many broken tackles y'all thought he would have had, I think y'all would definitely, and in 12 games, getting like 19 carries a game, how many do you think I would say? Just it, like, and this is a general question.
25? I'm
Huh?
25? 20,
No, no.
25?
No, way higher than that.
Well,
No, yeah, it would be. What would an
don't even
elite
know the
back
average.
average? About five a game or something of that nature?
On 19 carries, if you average 5, you probably average about 35%.
Oh,
A
So
carry.
roughly 5 to 7.
Yeah.
Um,
And
gotcha.
he had 12 games, so you would think about 80 is
Yeah.
what I would have thought. He had 66, which is a lot lower than I expected for him to have on the year. So that was something, especially for his size. He's more of a tackle breaker than a shifty guy.
sure.
So I thought that was interesting. But yeah.
Yeah, he was. And again, when I was watching the combine with you, you were just like, "Please, can one of these running backs just have a bad combine so it can help us, solidify and feel great about these rankings." And he was the one that he didn't drop it all, but he was just like, "Oh, okay." And maybe his 40 was a little bit more disappointing than most people would have seen, even though it wasn't the slowest, but based on what you expected from him is essentially how it goes. But I've seen a comparison. I wanted to get your take on that. I thought was pretty fun. I've seen a lot of people say like he's a DeMarco Murray-esque back. Do you kind of envision that in the way he plays?
Yeah. Yeah, I could see that. The same size probably overall, the like explosiveness. I think that DeMarco Murray had more wiggle, though. I think that Caleb Johnson is more of like a I'm gonna run through you type of guy than the athleticism that I want to like with the DeMarco Murray that I think he had. I remember seeing DeMarco Murray do crazy spin moves and stuff, and I don't think that Caleb Johnson can do those types of things. But yeah, I think it's fine.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I even brought up DeMarco Murray in his scouting combine. He actually ran a 4.43, so that's even quicker than I thought. So, but yeah, that was one that we hadn't really talked about, at least amongst us. But I thought it was kind of fun because they're talking about like one cut running backs and stuff like that.
For sure.
With the combine or the 40 being 4.57 at the combine, speed's disappointing compared to the average for running backs. But I was looking at his long runs, and this last year, or in 2024, his long was 75. In 2023, it was 67, and then in 2022, it was 75. So, I mean, he's got the ability when he does get in the open field to take off and not get caught necessarily. I don't think he's obviously going to do it every time or be that kind of guy, but he has at least shown on his film that he can make the big run and break away when needed. He also returned kickoffs, a couple in 2023, and then I think it's at 13 in 2022. So at some point at that time, he had the explosiveness and speed. So I wonder if he's got that, based on how they develop him too, being able to be a bruiser, but also have the speed to take off.
Well, I'll tell you what, he should never have been returning kickoffs when you had Cooper DeJean. But
Well,
that's just a me thought. So I think that's an Iowa problem. But
Iowa has a lot of offensive problems that they
yeah,
don't
issues.
know how to figure out.
it's in the Ferentz family tree. So
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go over to the next guy. It's going to be Travion Henderson from Ohio State. And Cam texted me and he was like, "Hey, they're talking about Travion Henderson at 3," and I was like, "Good, because we got him at 3." That was like during the Senior Bowl, and I was like, "Yeah, Travion Henderson is legit." We talk about the production and stuff like that with, of course, having Quinshon Judkins there, but Travion Henderson. If you look at a 7.1 yards per carry, that should tell you a lot about what he can do. He's a former 5-star. And he is a blocking dude on Pass Pro. He absolutely decleats people constantly. And I know that he's got a low passing grade, the pass blocking grade at 42.3. Well, PFF apparently doesn't take into account just like consistency, I guess. I don't know. Because like I would have expected that to be in at least the 55, 60 range. So he is very good at pass blocking. He runs behind his pads downhill, but I think he's more of obviously he's going to be an outside zone scheme type of guy. He's powerful for his size, and he is a home run threat at any point. And this is the guy that we were saying explosive, explosive, explosive earlier when we were talking about Dylan Sampson. This is the comparison right here. Dylan Sampson versus Travion is a very interesting conversation because both of them are similar. I like what Travion does a little bit more, but he's also 2 years older. So we shall see. We shall see. But he's a really great player. And if I'm going to talk about some of the bad things, I had one con. And it was just consistency running between the tackles. That was my only con. That was it on his whole game. So
Yeah, and with him, he was another one that we were kind of surprised that he did decide to come back last year because despite an injury-plagued junior year, he still was considered by most people RB1, and yeah, he probably wasn't a first-round pick, but typically you don't pass it up if you're among the top of your class at your position. But yeah, he came back and despite sharing the field with somebody that a lot of people viewed as better than him, a lot of times he was the more explosive guy. Big plays you need to happen, like in the semifinal game against Texas after they, scored a touchdown and kind of weathered the storm, and then all of a sudden right before half a 75-yard screen that just they had no chance of even coming close to catching him. And so like even when you look at the 40s and we. At least I lost some money on, betting his under because I thought he was going to be lights out quick. And, it was surprising, but that doesn't, again, necessarily concern me because we've seen, how he puts the tape on and what he does when he has the ball in his hands. He's one of the most explosive threats in the entire class. And, just kind of has a sample or injury history. Obviously, his sophomore and junior years missed a lot of time in both of those seasons. He also, 2021, at the end of his true freshman season, where he had 19 touchdowns, he broke his foot at the end of the year. But the two extremely healthy seasons he had, for the most part, averaged 7.5 yards a touch, 30 touchdowns combined, and limited touches, too. He never had more than 210 touches in a season, and a lot of that is just kind of open field stuff that's not really wearing and tearing on you. So, really strong back, and there's a reason that a lot of people are starting to say he's a fringe first-round running back.
Yeah, I think my favorite part about him is that he had that amazing freshman year, and it's actually his most productive in terms of total rushing yards and rushing touchdowns. And then, like Cam said, fighting off the injuries, and then to come in with this highly touted Quinshon Judkins joins, and he essentially recovers from his injuries very well and is able to put up the 7.1 yards per carry, showing he's moved past the injuries. He's obviously recovered well. He's still playing at a very high level, and put on a good performance at the combine. Athletic guy, obviously against Texas, showed the tape. So I really like him up here at 3.
So one thing I want to mention before we switch over is he is truly a 1B style player. And when I say 1B, it's not that he's the second best running back. It means that he's not the guy that's going to start the game. David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs style. Yeah. He's not going to take 70% of the snaps. That's not really his style. The best thing that happened for Travion Henderson was Quinshon Judkins going and being his 1A to show his skill set as a 1B. That's truly how I feel about it. It's just like when he got there, it was like, oh, Travion Henderson is better than we thought just because he doesn't have to take all the snaps and he can play in the situations that he's supposed to be in. Yeah. And he did great, obviously, and that's why he's all the way at 3. So I thought that he looked great this year, and hopefully he can stay healthy because that'll really help him, obviously. He is in a tier of his own. This is our 3rd tier, and he's the 3rd running back. So guess what? Tier 2 will be the 2nd running back, and Tier 1 is a guy all by himself. But yeah, so let's go to Tier 2, and the number 2 running back on the list is Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina. He just does it by himself. Basically 5.9 yards per carry on one of the worst ACC football teams. And ACC, we talked about a lot, was really bad. And Omarion Hampton was like, I'm still good. Does not matter. So he was extremely impressive. I mean, 4.35 yards after contact into that 5.9. Like, there's not a lot of room there. That's all I'm saying. Like, he was getting hit right at the line of scrimmage almost every play and making something happen. He has 126.8 elusive rating. I think that that's just absolutely ridiculous for getting hit so early in the line of scrimmage. 138.3 yards per game, second team All American, 1,222 yards after contact. He had 10 games of 100 plus yards. Like, he is just an absolute freak. Like, I don't know what to say. Like, he just is. And he's a good pass blocker. He's a good receiver. He is the true 3-down back. This is the true 3-down back, you know. He wears on defenses because he runs down with his behind his pads. He's the bull in the china cabinet, you know. He's going to break everything. He's coming for you, you know. But the part that gets you is like, okay, I just said all those things about his power and all this stuff. Well, as a runner, he's actually very patient. He's got great vision, and good acceleration, and he's fast. 4.46 is legit. Like, when he ran that, I was like, yeah, this guy, if he doesn't go in the top 15 picks, top 20 picks, like right after Genty, who we'll talk about in a second, like, he's getting close. How about this? Omarion Hampton is closer to tier 1 than he is to TreVeyon Henderson in tier 3. Mm-hmm. Like, that's an absolute fact to me. So, yeah.
Yeah, he was, you know, the soon-to-be named running back 1 this class was your guy that you get all the credit in the world for being very early on coming into this year and how to expect from them. But Omarion Hampton, maybe he was higher ranked than that guy in particular, but he was my guy. Like, if you've heard me off air, I talk about him all the time because of how much I love the way he plays. It's really hard to get 2,000 scrimmage yards on a 6-7 team, and he was able to do it. 5 touchdown games, 250-plus yard games, and back-to-back, and just all the touches in the world. Everything you want in a running back is what he is, and there's a reason that guys like Mel Kiper, who, you know, running backs can be debated on how high their draft capital should be. He hates them more than almost any other scout, and yet he, in his recent mock draft before, you know, the official combine and free agency kicked off, had him at 12th overall. That just kind of shows how high he values them and how high other teams do as well. So yeah, he's going to be a whole lot of fun to watch over the next few years.
You know, if I didn't have a direct relationship with the guy at number 1, I'll tell you right now, Omarion Hampton is my favorite guy. Like, just like the encompassing of what a running back is. This is that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you completely. Dustin?
All I was going to add was that for NBA fans out there, they know who DeMarcus or Boogie Cousins is. He was recently in a podcast and was asked, is it harder to average like 25, be the leading scorer, basically 30 points a game on a bad team or a good team? And the consensus was among the NBA players was it's way harder on a bad team because you're the only good one. You're the only one they're game planning against. And so on a good team, you've got other things to guard. Omarion Hampton kind of reminds me of that on a team that was 6-7, was floundering, had multiple QBs get hurt. So their passing game was effectively ineffective because they couldn't use it. And he still put up amazing numbers and game in, game out, put up 100 yards and scored touchdowns, which is just super impressive when you know the main game plan of the other team is to stop you.
Right.
Yeah, and then one last thing, just kind of showing how, you know, on top of putting the production and the size, his relative athletic score obviously was best among running backs, but 9.93 out of 10 ranks 14th out of 1,909 running backs of all time between 1987 and now. So he is a historically athletic running back as well. So yeah, if it weren't for just G&T being Superman, Batman, Mike Myers, whatever you want to call him, you know, he would be talked about way, way, way more.
Yeah, he's honestly being disrespected.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing
being a mid-first round pick and being disrespected. That's how.
Seeing him in the 20s of big boards is disrespectful. And we have him top, I think he was like 12, 13. He's going to go up.
Yep.
So everybody knows. Like, his RAS score was even made me was like, okay, he's that good. So he's going to be even higher. He'll be top 10 when we release our top 100 board. So, yes, he is being disrespected. We will go to Genty. We'll start with Genty now.
You don't say.
We'll compare a little bit, though. One thing that I want to I do want to compare, okay? Because I think that Boise State probably was a solid Mountain West team without him, right? Like probably a, third place team without him. The reason he's won is because of the difference he made for that team overall to me. Plus, of course, he had all the stats. Like, we're not going to have to get into the stats. He had 14 of 14 games where he went over 100 yards. He had 6 of 14 games where he went over 200 yards. He had 185.8 yards per game, 29 touchdowns. He didn't even catch the ball this year. Like, every stat you look at, he's the best at. They're all first, basically. 5.25 yards after contact. That's unfreaking real, first off. 36 15-plus yard runs. 215.1 elusive rating. I didn't even know it was possible, honestly.
Mm-hmm. That's why I asked for the max, because it was just so much higher than everybody else's.
Yeah. My stat, how I do my stuff is I start with stats to kind of give me a baseline, and then I go pros and cons when I'm doing my write-ups. And my stat was everything. Talk about everything. Because he's that good, much better than everybody else at everything. So that's cool. I also want everybody to realize that this guy had has legit receiving ability. And if you look at the 2024 stats, you won't see that. Because he didn't have to catch the ball. They just handed it to him the whole game. In 2023, he had 44 catches for 578 yards. That's probably second or third in this class for yards. His rushing, what makes him so good, and we've talked about this a little bit, what I look for in a player, is his contact balance. His contact balance is the most legit contact balance I've ever scouted. Ever. I've seen him compared to Alvin Kamara, and we talked about that, because Alvin Kamara is one of the better contact balance players in the NFL. But I don't think it's a one size fits all with Alvin Kamara with Jency, because Jency can actually run between the tackles consistently. Jency can take on 20 to 25 carries. At the NFL level, I think he can still do that. I don't think he should, but I think he could if he had to. Jency is the full package. He's a 3-down back with all of the right things. The only thing he's not great at, out of everything, is sometimes he has shaky pass blocking. Okay, that's it. That's all I got for you. Everything else, he is literally one of the best players at every level. Like, he is acceleration, speed. I wish he would run the 40, because you would have been like, holy crap, he's actually really fast. Like, people are like, oh, he's not that athletic. He just happened to play for Boise State. Like, this guy is freak. 2,600 yards. 2,750 all-purpose yards. Like, this is the guy. Omarion Hampton is really good, and he's getting closer, because I really like him. But Genty is going to be one, because he's a blue-chip player in this class.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, you did a great job on that breakdown.
Yeah.
It's hard to not just look at the numbers, even though everybody's going to bring them up and say, 27 and 30 touchdowns. Well, also sat out 3 second halves. How about that as well? And I don't know how many fourth quarters, because of what he was able to do just early on, and just like, hey, game just started. Oh, 70-yard touchdown. Oh, already happened. And like having the over-under props that we would just constantly look at and be like, man, 260? I kind of want to pick the over. I honestly do. He's everything you want a running back. I just hope that he just doesn't get worn out too soon, because 397 touches is a lot, and I know he's young, doesn't have an injury history, but that's kind of how running backs can kind of not have the long sustained careers if you just don't manage that early on. So I'm hoping that whoever does draft him in the top 10 gives him, a kind of workload that is manageable enough to where he can have the longevity that he deserves to have, and not just run him into the ground, not pay him in the, second contract, and then just kind of move on. And he just doesn't have the career that he probably deserves to have.
One thing I want to add, so there's only one other player that's ever had more yards than him rushing. It was Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders did it in 11 games. So if you take out all the halves and all the quarters that we just talked about, I think Genty and him are pretty freaking close, right?
Mm.
One thing, though, about this, I actually am starting to agree with you that he's going top 10. And the only reason I'm doing that is because, yes, that's fine. The Bears just signed so many players to the offensive line. They don't need to go draft that now.
Yep.
Necessary. They could, but they don't need to. I think that people are making moves that set up him being their draft pick. And so I am starting to get on board that he will be a top 10 draft pick.
I still want the credit though.
You can have it.
I'm just no, I'm just teasing. Obviously, that was a friendly bet with our first mock of we were saying the floor versus ceiling. We put him at 9 to New Orleans, and until they move on from Kamara, that's probably not going to happen. But he's just one of those. I don't know where he's going to go, but I feel like he's just going somewhere very, very high because people just are going to respect, how great he is as a player.
Every year, the running back position is the hardest position to mock. Like, if you're just, like, looking back all time, like, Najee Harris going to 24 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, that was one I was like, I don't think they should do that. And it was the right decision by me in the long run to not do that. Landon Dickerson was the guy I thought they should take. Well, that would have been a great pick for them. So, it's just, I have a hard time with, and you know this, I'm like Mel. But I'm not as bad as Mel. Mel's ridiculous.
Not as bad as
Mel's ridiculous. But I don't think running backs go in the first round unless they are the last piece to your team. A couple years ago, the Kansas City Chiefs win the Super Bowl. They pick CEH. Still a bad decision because they should have picked Jonathan Taylor, and we both thought that.
Imagine.
Such a bad decision. But I was like, okay, yeah, they can take him. He's sure. Like, they don't have any holes. And so I think it fit then. I don't know where he fits in the top 10 because I think all these other teams have holes. And that's why running back is such a hard position for me to say go in the first round for. Omarion Hampton and Genty are going in the first round. I don't care what anybody thinks. Like, that's just is what it is.
I do want to say for what it's worth in terms of like the draft odds of who will select him. Obviously right now Dallas is the favorite, which is the dumbest bet you could even make right now because one, he's not going to last that long, and two, Dallas isn't going to draft a running back in the first round. But the next up is the Las Vegas Raiders. Yours truly at plus 320 is a very heavy second best favorite, and they are all the way up at the 6th pick. So that just kind of shows, where Vegas is really kind of starting to lean a little bit.
Well, I will say, if we do go Genty,
you get Genty and Bowers, dude.
That's exactly what I was about to say. It's exactly what I was about to say. Because
Can
if we
have
do,
one?
No, sorry, but yeah, I'm excited to see what happens with the career of Genty, Omarion Hampton, all these guys. Like I said, I started loving guys when we started talking about 17. So there's a lot of guys I'd be okay with my team drafting, and you should feel the same way. Like, there's just that many good football players in this draft class. All 20 of these guys that are in the first 20 are going to be top 3 round guys to me. Like, not picked, but talent. Top 3 round guys. So, let's go to the last board. And it's a funny one because we're going to compare.
Once again.
Yeah, we're going to compare the 2024 to the 2025 rankings. And if you look, the first, 14 are all from the 2024 or 2025 group.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean,
it's that good.
It's that good, guys.
It is.
Trey Benson is the first one from 2024. You have another pair of 2025 guys, 17 2025 guys to your other 4. 2024 guys. 16, sorry, 2024 5 guys. Yeah, that's just how much better it is. So.
Let me ask you a question because there was only 2 really running backs that I was surprised by how few actually decided to not come or to return to school, but 2 of them from the same school did, and Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. If both of them were hypothetically in this class, where exactly would they be on this list possibly, or would either not even make it?
Well, I didn't go deep into both of them. Nick Singleton's a top 10 player. Just to put that out there. Nick Singleton's
so you can
above
bump Braylon down and probably Audric down.
Yeah. Nick Singleton's above Damian Martinez to me almost. So that's kind of, he's probably tier 4. He's probably in that same tier, but I also don't want to say that with conviction because I didn't watch enough. But at the same time, just from not only what other people say, but also just watching him, thinking he was coming out, then also watching him in the playoffs, I think he's a top 10 player. And he's that good too. So add him to that list.
Yeah. And then I'd even just honorable mention Jeremiah Love, who's not even eligible to be in this class, but he's a really good one that probably is going to be RB1 next year. So
He's legit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
His run in the playoff was one of my favorite runs I've seen in a long, long time.
the one where he was fighting for
On a bum knee.
on the goal line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or what about when he jumped over that guy
That too.
with,
was good
with
too.
no
All of
knee,
it.
with no leg? Yeah, he's good at football. But yeah, anything we want to talk about the greatest class of all time for the running back position?
We're gonna draft so much rookie running backs in best ball. That is literally all. If we don't leave a best ball draft with at least 3 rookie running backs, we probably messed up somewhere. That's how I take it. Whether it's going to be interesting to see how high ADP wise they're going to be, but yeah, any of them and all of them is going to be very fun, and it's going to be fun to. It's just going to be fun to re-rank these studs again after we know the matchmaking and where they went, because everybody's basically going to be in an opportunity to do it, and then some of them might even be teammates and going to have to go back and forth, and then put somebody like a Bucky Irving or a Chase Brown just to the wind as high ADPs and stuff like that.
Dustin?
I agree. I think it's going to be really fun to see just how good this class turns out to be. How many of them flourish, if any of them don't, and just to kind of go back and look. Hindsight's obviously 2020, but just seeing how amazing we're seeing all of them and the tape we've seen on a lot of these guys and watching them play, and then in the combine, and just seeing, it's going to be just a lot of fun to see how they all progress and see what ends up happening of this class.
Situation is so important when it comes to this position, and so I told Cam this. I think we're going to do a re-rank after, just for like projections for their first contract, wherever they go after the draft itself, because I think that's something we should do, because it's such an important thing for this position is where they go.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a fun one. It only took us, honestly, I'm really impressed by us going for only an hour and 26 minutes on 27 guys. So we appreciate y'all hanging out with us. If you would, go like the video. If you're still hanging out, subscribe to the channel. That's super helpful. And then also, if you have any comments, please comment. Tell us about maybe you go to Tennessee and you're like, Dylan Sampson's the truth. He should be higher. That's fine. I'm here to listen. If you like certain guys, that's just tell us who they are. And maybe I didn't rank them. Maybe I didn't talk about them. But obviously, there's so many good ones. It's hard. So we appreciate y'all hanging out.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys. We're on the road to 250. So if you haven't subscribed and joined the community already, please do so, because we're going to be talking about our position rankings throughout the rest of, March and into April. Do some mock the mocks, compare and judge other people for how they view people. It's a whole lot of fun to talk about and speculate. So we want you guys to be a part of it and join in on the discussion.
Thank you all very much for joining us.